Next on Channel 4, American football with the wildcard game between Houston and Seattle.
Here's some important news for knitters. Today saw the start of a brilliant new collection of knitting patterns called Creative Knitting. Published in weekly parts, you get at least 7 patterns every week, some of them using the most exciting wools and yarns. There are lots of helpful hints, and the patterns are so clearly explained that even I can follow them. Creative Knitting is on sale now at newsagents. And here's some more good news. This lovely binder is free with part 1.
"1987 was the year that saw Peugeot build the 2 millionth 205, making it one of the most successful small cars ever built. It also saw the launch of the British-built 309 GTI, a new standard in Peugeot performance. And now, the new British-built Peugeot 405 has been voted European Car of the Year and is all set to be the first success of 1988. Peugeot, the lion goes from strength to strength.
There is an art to making white wine and mushroom sauce. The art of blending white wine, mushrooms picked in their prime, ripe green and red peppers, onions and fresh herbs and spices. Now Knorr have refined that art, for we have found a way of keeping it so that every time you use it, it will taste as fresh as the day it was made. Knorr recipe sauces, fresh ways to make classic casseroles.
In 1986, an influential U.S. business magazine asked its readers to pick their favorite U.S. airline from a list of 10.
Delta, Pan American, Eastern, TWA, American.
There were no major surprises except one.
And the runner-up is...
Piedmont.
Piedmont? Piedmont? Piedmont?
Piedmont.
You see, Piedmont came second without even being included on the survey. Piedmont, now transatlantic daily.
She's done it again. She knows what she's doing. She's got Horse Sense. Horse Sense is published in weekly parts. There are lessons for beginners with easy-to-follow step-by-step instructions and lessons for more experienced riders with lots of advice on how to take care of a pony so that it stays well and happy. In fact, you'll find everything you want to know about horses and riding in Horse Sense. So start collecting it tomorrow.
Hungerford, a name no one will forget. A peaceful market town which was raked by gunfire one afternoon last August. This week has been investigating why Michael Ryan was free to kill and kill again, why the police who went to intercept him were unarmed, and why the special unit trained to tackle armed men didn't arrive until the killing was over. That's Hungerford, the lessons, at this week's special 9 o'clock Thursday on ITV.
This is Thames from London. News time now at the studios of ITN. The time is 10 o'clock.
Mr. Mellor sticks to his view. The Israelis shoot another Arab. The banks revive the dollar around the world. The drunk driver who killed this boy finally gets 15 months. Going to law again for the hole-in-the-heart baby. And he knows what to do with African tea. Good evening. Israel's Prime Minister, Mr. Yitzhak Shamir, has rebuked the Foreign Office Minister, Mr. Mellor. Mr. Shamir didn't like his condemnation of Palestinian refugee camps in Israeli-occupied territories. Mr. Mellor had called one camp an affront to civilized values. Mr. Shamir met Mr. Mellor in Tel Aviv this afternoon. Afterwards he said, "It's not customary among friends to enter into public debate." Mr. Mellor defended his criticisms in an Israeli television interview tonight. He said, A friend owes another friend his genuine judgment. In the Gaza Strip today, Israeli troops shot dead at least one Palestinian and wounded 7 others. And there's been more violence in Palestinian camps, among them Jabalia, the camp Mr. Mellor visited yesterday.
With the Israeli government on the defensive over criticisms of its security policy in the occupied territories, the death today of at least one more Palestinian in new rioting can only increase international pressure for change.
They killed 2 of us. One of them was buried just 2 hours ago, and the second one was sent to the hospital in Israel.
In West Bank towns and Gaza refugee camps today, Palestinians protested about the Israeli government decision to deport 9 Palestinian activists. Foreign Office Minister David Mellor, who shocked Israelis with his outspoken criticisms, met the Prime Minister Mr. Shamir this afternoon amidst doubt that his remarks had harmed Anglo-Israeli relations.
They have not damaged the relations between Israel and Britain. Maybe they were harmful to the effectiveness of Mr. Mellor's mission.
Mr. Mellor defended his views on Israeli television tonight.
There is a deep friendship between Britain and Israel, and but a friend owes another friend their genuine judgment. It has been for some time now, and it's no good anyone deluding themselves that what I'm saying is out of line with the British government's view. It has been the British government's view, if you look at the speech that Sir Geoffrey Howe made in October to the Conservative Friends of Israel, that the present state of affairs in the occupied territories cannot continue.
Some Israelis have welcomed Mr. Mellor's remarks, according to the Jerusalem Post newspaper.
The minister has driven home to the Israeli public something that a lot of people here were trying to ignore, trying to put out of their minds. That is the level of horror in the Western world over what's happened here, the level of frustration at the absence of any political progress.
The PLO leader Yasser Arafat is expected to call for international protection for Palestinians in the occupied territories at a PLO Central Council meeting on Thursday. And in New York, the United Nations Security Council may tell Israel not to deport the 9 Palestinian activists. But Israel is used to ignoring criticism from the rest of the world and insists the solution to the Palestinian question lies as much in the hands of the Arab states as in her own.
A suspected Lebanese terrorist, Abbas Ali Hamadi, went on trial in West Germany today and appealed for the release of the man he's accused of kidnapping. Hamadi denies kidnapping a German businessman in Beirut, Rudolf Cordes, following the arrest of his brother on terrorist charges. In Beirut, Shiite terrorists holding Mr. Cordes threatened retaliation.
West German police threw a comprehensive security cordon around Dusseldorf's Special Terrorist Court this morning. They're learning, like other Western nations before them, the complications of arresting and trying Arab terrorists. Before the hearing even began, this letter arrived from the Lebanese group still holding a West German hostage. It warned them to be careful or face the consequences. It was the arrest of this man, Mohammed Hamadi, that first got West Germany into the Lebanese hostage crisis. He's believed to be the man here who hijacked a TWA jet to Beirut 3 years ago. 2 West Germans were immediately abducted in retaliation. One, Rudolf Cordes, is still being held. He was taken just 3 days before Terry Waite. It's Mohammed Hamadi's brother, Abbas Hamadi, who's in court today, accused of being involved in that kidnapping of the 2 West Germans. Through his lawyer, Hamadi denied all involvement and actually appealed for the men holding Rudolf Cordes to release him. Events here are putting the West German government into the same dilemma as other Western countries. They don't want to be seen making concessions to the gunmen, and yet are reluctant to allow their policies to harm Germans abroad. Chancellor Kohl is under pressure to stand firm and make no deals.
I don't think this country is the model of giving in to terrorists. We have a great record to defend, and the Chancellor will want to keep it that way. I'm quite positive.
And the German Justice Ministry is keen to show that the courts here act independently, free from any political pressure. James Mates, News at 10, West Germany.
Here, a couple whose son was killed by a drunken driver succeeded in having him sent to prison for 15 months today. The parents of Mark Healy started a private prosecution against Paul Curran, who was driving the van in which Mark died. Today they described the sentence as disgusting and said Curran should have got 10 years for manslaughter.
21-year-old Mark Healy was killed when a car driven by a friend crashed into a tree. At his funeral, his parents walked alongside the driver, Paul Curran, who survived with a broken leg. Curran had told them he hadn't been drinking and driving. But when it was revealed at an inquest that he had, in fact, been well over the limit, Mr. and Mrs. Healy mounted a relentless campaign to make sure he went to prison. Initially, the Crown Prosecution Service charged Curran with careless driving and driving with excess alcohol. More serious charges came only after the Healys persisted in their fight, helped by the campaign against drinking and driving. At the Old Bailey, 20-year-old Curran was sentenced to 15 months in prison.
It's been absolutely scandalous, and when you get faceless people at the Crown Prosecution saying that your son's life is a waste of public money to take it to trial, it's absolutely scandalous. I mean, it says it's really no regard for a human being whatsoever.
When you know that your son is laying 6 foot under when his death could have been avoided if there was laws.
In court, the prosecuting counsel, Mr. John Bevan, praised Mrs. Healy for her tenacity and for her determination. He said the fact that the defendant had pleaded guilty to 2 counts of having caused death by reckless driving had proved that she was right. And the judge, Robert Limburg, QC, effectively criticised the Crown Prosecution Service. He said that to have simply disregarded the case at so early a stage was, to his mind, somewhat extraordinary. David Blankhorst, News at 10 at the Old Bailey.
The central banks went out and spent money again today to revive the dollar. And again, no one really opposed them. The markets think it's worth a try. If not, it'll mean higher interest rates. In London, the dollar jumped up, the pound closing at $1.8278, down nearly 4.5 cents. The dollar's up the same in Europe.